So if I asked to speak to the Buddha within you, that had never been done before. But the moment I say, let me speak to the Buddha within you, and you say, okay, I am the Buddha. I say, okay, then who are you not? Well, I'm not Hale. I'm not the self. I'm not somebody else. I am the Buddha within you. And the moment I say that, I, in a way, skip or transcend the having to become. We
Right.
know that becoming doesn't work. It's being.
Yes.
Every time we want to become something, we make effort and we try to become it, and it only gets further and further away from us. So
Yes.
if we
Yes.
make that leap from becoming to being the Buddha versus trying to become a Buddha, it's night and day difference. And so
Totally.
for years, 2,500 years, even in the Zen tradition, we still tried to become Buddha until finally, knocking our head against the wall umpteen times, we finally give up or relinquish, and there's the Buddha.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today I'll be joined by Genpo Roshi. Genpo Roshi is one of the earliest pioneers of Zen in the Western world, especially throughout Eastern and Western Europe. He is the creator of Big Mind Zen and has established one of the largest and most successful lineages in the Western world. The Greatest Secret is a book that talks a lot about awakening, and that the key is recognizing that you are not the body mind, but you are that which is aware of it. And I know that's a core tenet in Buddhism as well. Can you talk about it from your perspective?
Yes, and it's actually a very important aspect in our practice of Zen. And sometimes we call it dropped off body mind, shedding body mind, but it's discovering the transcendent, discovering that we are one mind, one heart, one body, one spirit, and we can go on to say one planet
Yeah, right.
and one world and one consciousness, and to discover the oneness, because once we discover that we're all one, then what naturally arises, of course, is love and compassion for all beings and all things,
Yes.
even for the planet, for rocks and mountains and rivers and oceans, for it all, and it's all one.
Yes.
So that's a very important aspect of Zen Buddhism, and it's something that we emphasize. And we emphasize the breakthroughs, the awakenings, the realizations. And of course, there are openings, and awakenings can be as little as lighting a stick of incense in a dark room to as bright, sunny, beautiful day like it is today, where everything is really clear, or sometimes you just have a glimpse of it. So it's a very
Yes.
important part of
Yes.
Zen. Yeah.
Yes, and again, the key, if in my opinion, and you'll have to tell me if you agree with this. And key, in my opinion, is to not take any of it too seriously.
Just laugh about it. I always tell people, you could take your practice seriously, but don't take yourself so seriously.
Yes, yes. I think that's where a lot of us get stuck. We take ourselves too seriously.
Go ahead.
Well, especially since the self that we're taking seriously isn't actually who we are anyway. It's just a projection of our minds. And we take that seriously, and that which is exquisitely beautiful and radiantly obvious in this moment, we miss it because we're taking this imaginary self so seriously. Yeah. Wouldn't you agree?
I do. And in fact, one of the things we call it treasure that lies within. And we have three treasures.
Yes.
So within us, we wake up to the fact that we're not the fabricated self or the self that we believe we are. We are Buddha, which means all things.
Yes.
Buddha is awakened to the fact that we are all one.
Yes.
And then we are Dharma, and that's the manifestation or the teachings of the awakened person or awakened people.
Yes.
the awakened ones. And then we are the Sangha, and that's the community of all of us that are working on waking up in this lifetime.
Yes.
And then those three treasures all lie within, and we have to discover them. And it's kind of like living in a home for one's entire life, not realizing that you're living on the greatest vein of gold that has ever been discovered, and you don't discover it until maybe when you do, and it could be too late, like just dying or before death, and not
Yes.
too late, it's just late.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is wake up to that and enjoy and appreciate this life as the awakened one, or as the three treasures. Yeah.
Yes. Beautifully put. I love that, because learning that the treasures within helps you feel that treasure no matter what's going on outside of you. In other words, that treasure within doesn't change even if there's challenges in your life or in
there will be.
Of course there will. That's the nature of life.
Yeah.
Life is not, it doesn't follow our script. It follows what's the natural progression of the unfolding
of karma.
Of karma, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but we can't be arbiters saying, I want this karma and I don't want that karma. I want this to happen, I don't want that to happen. Every time we do that, we suffer. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote a book. My first book was actually on this. So in Zen, I talk a lot about what one of the ancestors said way, way back around 600 AD. And what he said is that if you make a distinction, that distinction separates heaven and hell. So the moment we have a preference for what is over what isn't, in other words, we want something other than the way it is, that's the cause of suffering and misery in our life. And so as long as we can work with what is, and in other words, acknowledging it, I don't like the word accepting, embodying it, embracing it, and then working with it, of course, we can make amazing changes. And then there's no one to blame for the way it is. But when we resist it, when we know that resistance breeds more resistance,
right? And it's quite futile.
And it's very futile. That's exactly right. So way back, even 1,500 years ago, in Zen, they discovered that having a preference creates suffering.
Yes, I agree 100%. Yeah. If we're either wanting, anytime we're wanting anything to be different than the way it is, it's an IOU for suffering.
That's right.
Because it is how it is, period, full stop. That doesn't mean you can't, in the next moment, it won't change, or you can't work towards bringing about positive changes in your environment or in your inner experience.
Right.
But when you allow what is to be as it is, I agree with you to not use the word acceptance, because often people hear the word acceptance and they think, oh, that means I need to resign myself to, I can't do anything about it.
Resign.
But that's not what acceptance means. Acceptance is something that happens. It's a natural unfolding that happens inside of you. When you allow it is to be, what comes from that is a feeling of acceptance of what is.
That's right.
But if you try to force that, it doesn't work.
That's right. I call it embracing, but that's right. Very, very true what you just said.
Yes. And in the Buddhist teachings or in Zen, what is it that how do you help people get to this understanding?
That's been the whole point of Zen is how do you bring about in someone an awakening experience? And it's very difficult. It's very difficult. One of the things that the big mind offers, which, I kind of discovered this process 1999, about 22 years ago.
Tell us about that, the discovery.
Well, okay, so I've been studying Zen since 71. And I'd gone through the whole Zen training, all the koans, and became what we call an ancestor back in 1980. And then in 1983, I met Hal Stone, and I began to study with Hal. He's a Western psychotherapist, originally a Jungian, studied Gestalt and many other forms of psychotherapy. And I began to study with him in 83. And the technique was called voice dialogue.
So what is voice dialogue? Just so the people
Okay.
don't know what that
Well,
is.
voice dialogue is a Western psychological technique where you give voice to various aspects within you. So, like fear. So, you give
I get
voice
it.
to your
Yes.
fear. Anger. You give voice to your
Yes.
anger.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
the
Yes.
beauty of the voice dialogue and also other techniques that also similar to that, you distance yourself from the self.
Yes.
So that's the beauty. So the moment I say, okay, Genpo, to myself, I'd like to speak to your anger. And I say, okay, I am the voice of anger, but I'm no longer Genpo.
Right.
I'm just only the voice. When I say that, then I create some distance. Now, the more distance I can create from the self, and this is the basis of big mind process, the more distance I can create from the self, the easier it is to let it go, to relinquish it.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Because everything closer, like my children are very close to me, it's harder to let them go. If it's somebody else's children and they're far away, meaning in a feeling sense, they're far away, then it's easier to let them go than it is my own. So anything I call mine is more difficult. So my understanding is more difficult than your understanding for me to let go of.
Right.
It's the opposite, right?
Right.
Your notions, your ideas, your beliefs, it's easier for me to let go of yours than it is my own beliefs, my own notions, and my own understanding. So immediately, the moment we give voice to any aspect, it's easier to let go of the self. So I realized that after using the process from 83 to 99, I realized, wow, I can get in touch with transcendent voices. Yes. So I mentioned earlier the three treasures, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So if I asked to speak to the Buddha within you, that had never been done before.
Yes.
But the moment I say, let me speak to the Buddha within you, and you say, okay, I am the Buddha. I say, okay, then who are you not? Well, I'm not Hale. I'm not the self. I'm not the non-Buddha. I'm not somebody else. I am the Buddha within you. And the moment I say that, I, in a way, skip or transcend the having to become. Right. We know that becoming doesn't work. It's being.
Yes.
Every time we want to become something, we make effort and we try to become it, and it only gets further and further away from us.
Absolutely, yes.
Right. So if we make that leap from becoming to being the Buddha versus trying to become a Buddha, it's night and day difference. And so,
totally.
And so for years, 2,500 years, even in the Zen tradition, we still tried to become Buddha until finally, knocking our head against the wall umpteen times, we finally give up or relinquish, and there's the Buddha.
Right. It'd been there all along.
But we relinquished the efforting and the trying, and we discovered there it is. So the Big Mind process, I had discovered this in June of 99. And I saw, oh my God, this is rich. This is gold. This can really help the world. And so I named it, and I started developing the Big Mind process using as my, let's say, stepping stones, voice dialogue and Zen training. So now I have something I call Big Mind Zen versus, let's say, Soto Zen or Rinzai Zen or any other form of Zen. The Big Mind uses the process to help one actualize, first realize and then actualize what it is to be an awakened person. So,
yes, that's beautiful. That's just beautiful. And I've heard you talk about it. Do you switch back and forth still? In other words, you'll talk from the Buddha perspective, and then you'll talk from the anger, so that people can disassociate from both and just be the Buddha that is behind. Right. Is that what you do?
Absolutely.
You want to explain that too?
Yeah, and I'll explain that. So I've developed over time, it didn't happen until about 2005 or six, so about 5, 6, 7 years after the big mind, I discovered what I called the triangle. And what the triangle symbolizes is if you look at a triangle, equilateral triangle, where one base is the self, which we know is a fabrication.
Yes.
And the other corner of the triangle is the transcendent. It could be the Buddha, it could be the Bodhisattva, it could be anything. It could be Jesus Christ, it could be Christ conscious, it could be big mind. Anything on the other side that's transcendent. In other words, goes beyond the dualistic realm.
Yes.
And then we go to the apex, what I call the apex. And from that perspective, when we look, we embrace both the self and the Buddha. So we don't want to get stuck in the self, but we also don't want to get stuck in identification with the Buddha.
Yes.
In Zen training, we have gotten stuck there. And because we know that we are not completely living the life of a Buddha or living up to the life of a Buddha, we're constantly trying to become that.
Right.
And there's a problem again.
Yes, yes.
So it just becomes never ending. So we need to disidentify also with the Buddha, and I call it the unnameable. So the apex is forever unnameable. So I just call it the apex. I don't give it a name. Like in voice dialogue, we call that the aware ego.
Yes.
But it's still naming it.
Yes, yes.
So I like to call it just the unnameable. Yes. Or the actualized self, or the actualized human being.
Yes, yes.
Self-actualized human being.
Yes.
Where we don't give ourselves a new identity and a new thing to get stuck on.
Yes. Well, and that's so easy for the mind to do. The mind is like a flypaper. Exactly. It's always looking for something. It's either looking to stick to something or trying to get something to stick to it.
Exactly.
But what's interesting, I love what you're describing, because it also mirrors a technique that we teach, several of them, but one of them is, we call it holistic releasing, where you embrace the apparent problem, and then you embrace its transcendence.
Yeah.
And you go back and forth between the two, and they dissolve each other, and what you're left with is just the pure awareness that has no name.
That has no name. That's beautiful. Yeah. Well, this is a time, I think, where many of us are, in a way, discovering something beyond the traditional, something that we in the West are offering the process.
Yeah, I think that's a key piece. We're so fortunate to have all the wisdom traditions, both the Eastern and the Western wisdom traditions, Zen and Advaita Vedanta, and there's so many. And also from the East, the mystic Christians and the kind of in between, there's Sufism. There's many, many rich, beautiful traditions. And I know I'm leaving many out. And of course, Buddhism, the whole Buddhist tradition, there's so many aspects of it that are just exquisitely beautiful. But what's wonderful about the time period we're living in is that they're all getting exposed to each other in this neutral place where this alchemy can happen. And we, as this generation, we're finding a way where we're looking to where they're all pointing instead of looking at the pointers. And when we do that, then it enriches whatever tradition we're from. Yet at the same time, we can transcend tradition and just be that pure emptiness or awareness or beingness or isness that has no name and has no form. Would you agree with that?
I do. And I think it's important that we realize not to give it a label.
Yes.
Because the moment we give it a name, we give it a label, in that moment, we identify with that and then we grab it.
Yes, yes.
So it's very important. I also feel that, when I started this 50 years ago, and I don't know when you started, but when I started this whole process, it was East meeting West.
Yes.
And that happened. And I kept saying, but what about the South, Southern Hemisphere? And I think we're now in a time where the Southern Hemisphere and the traditions are also coming into play and giving us even a kind of more expanded view of how to get to the place that we're all going.
Yes,
Or
yes,
back to
yes.
where we are.
Right. It's so funny that again, one of the things that happens, again, I'm from the tradition I'm from is a very new tradition. That Lester Levinson, my teacher, was a fully realized teacher, but he was free of tradition. He wasn't from a particular lineage.
Right.
And I guess right now I'm the lineage holder for his tradition because he passed it all on to me and asked me to continue it. And at first I tried to do it his way, and his way was still about becoming. And then what happened is, it started in the 90s, if not before then, I started realizing it's not about becoming, it's about what already is. And if you work from what already is, the becoming drops away and it gets effortless and beautiful. And
Yeah,
so,
I mean, go
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Suzuki Roshi coined a beautiful phrase. You effort towards effortlessness.
Yes.
Right? It drops
No.
away, like you just said. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel like you need to make an effort, make an effort. But what you discover at some point is that being what you actually are is the most effortless thing possible. And it's not even a thing. It's just being.
It's just effortless.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just being. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very clear.
Exactly. So, do you have things that you'd like to share with the audience? Any pointers, practical pointers? Well, practical from the sense of something they can do to explore this for themselves?
Yeah, one of the things one can do is just practice voices on your own. And I have several ways that I recommend doing that.
No, please share them.
Yeah, for me, so in 99, after so many years of meditation and concentration practices and koan study and all that, I found that I could actually do the voices on my own as I'm meditating. So advanced practitioners can do it that way. You can actually ask to speak, let's say, may I speak to your big mind, for example. And I say, okay, I'm big mind. Okay, so what are you not? Well, I'm not Genpo. He's certainly not a big mind. He's something else. I'm not the self. I'm not his anger. I'm not his this. I'm not his that. I'm just big mind. Okay, so how big are you? Well, I look in. Well, I can't find any limit.
Right.
I'm limitless. Well, what color are you? I can't find a color as I look in. Well, what shape are you? I can't find a shape. So in a way, I can say I'm colorless, I'm shapeless, I'm limitless. Okay, then who are you? Well, I'm me. It's me. It's this body. This very body is limitless. This very body is the Buddha. This very body is the Bodhisattva. This very body is Christ consciousness. This very body is the whole. And then using that technique, I can do it in my sitting. Now, of course, there's further to go using the triangle, and you change voices and you go back to the other corner and all that. That's it more advanced. But I'm just saying how it could be used for beginners if they have some concentration. If they don't have the ability to sit there and do that, then they can write it. Or they can work with others.
Good suggestion. Yes,
they can write it out. Okay, so you ask yourself to speak, and then you write as the one speaking. Yeah. But also you can use others, and that's where our Big Mind organization comes in. We connect people to use it with each other, so we're actually facilitating one another, and we trade off. And it's a wonderful thing to do with your partner. My partner and I, you met her, Charlotte. Yeah. We did a lot of this work, and we still do, especially coming into our connection, a lot of work where we facilitated one another. And you actually can become more intimate that way than many other ways, because you start to know the intimate parts of each other as well as oneself.
Yes.
and the intimate aspects. And so your vulnerability is more present. You learn how to be more vulnerable, more open, more receptive. You learn how to disidentify with certain things that you might label as that's who I am, that's what I am. No, not necessarily. That's what I'm conditioned to be.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
not who I am.
Right.
And so it really helps in relationship. I feel like we have a very, very mature and healthy relationship. And I'm happy to say that because I'm not one that has emphasized relationships in my life. Being in Zen and in a monastery for 40 years, I didn't work on relationships much. I had to go to the Western psychotherapy, like voice dialogue, to help me. And my wife happens to be a therapist, so she helps me a lot in the relational, because the Zen is more transcendent and less relational, non-relational.
Yes. Yes. And I did just meet your wife, and which I'm thrilled about, because I could tell just from seeing the two of you together that you have a wonderful relationship. There's this beauty and this openness and this simpleness. And it was very fun to watch. It really was. It's beautiful.
She was trying to, just for the audience, she was trying to help me out with the technical.
Right. Well, all three of us were bumbling through.
At least we can laugh about it.
Yeah, I know, and that's important. I mean, that's just that in itself is such a simple teaching. If you can't laugh about it, if you're taking it seriously, you're giving too much power to that which isn't real. It's just a source of suffering. So
it's so true, and everything's that way.
Yes.
don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff.
It's all small stuff. That's right.
And we forget.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course we forget. Yeah. It's interesting you said about I love that you have the three ways. You can either do it with yourself, you can dialogue with yourself using paper, or you can do it with a partner. And we find the same thing is true with releasing. When you can do it with yourself, and it's very powerful, but sometimes it's very helpful to just take out a piece of paper and write it down, so you become more objective to it. And it's beautiful. There's such a sweetness that happens when two people are facilitating each other in letting go, just like I'm sure when they're facilitating each other in Big Mind, because however you feel like you're helping them, you're always helping yourself more. Absolutely. Without realizing it, because there's just this, you have to get out of your own way in order to be there for the other person. And that's an exquisite part of both of our traditions, which is beautiful.
Yeah. Now I want to say something to this. So it's beautiful to me that you and I both have approached the whole awakening consciousness process in very different ways, in very different teachings, and very different perspective. You could say, like, we're climbing a mountain and we started on different ends.
That's right. With different gear.
With different gear. And yet we've come to the same realizations, the same understandings. Everything you say, I can go, yeah.
Yeah, same thing on this end. Yes.
Right? And yet we've taken very different paths, and we're still on very different paths.
Yes.
And yet it's one.
Yes.
So it's beautiful. Yes.
And everyone listening, whatever your path is, as long as you're following your heart, just know that, and you're earnest, you'll discover the same things for yourself. Genpo and I are not unique.
That's right. And we're all coming home.
That's right.
Home. Yeah.
That's right. We truly are. Yeah. Truly are.
We're all coming home.
Yes. So is there anything you'd like to leave people with as something to explore? Now, I know you gave people a suggestion about exploring Big Mind, which sounds wonderful. Is there anything else that you might?
Well, I truly believe in meditation, obviously. Yes. And I have, over the years, in a way you can say, kind of simplified it. Good. And made it more accessible for people universally. When I started back in 71, we sat full lotus or half lotus, or we couldn't do full lotus. We sat for 10, 12 hours a day, sometimes 7 days, sometimes more. I did once 3 months. of sitting 12 hours a day with a group of 30 people, you
Yeah.
know, and it was a kind of samurai approach to
Yes,
spirituality,
definitely.
right? And we used the Kyosaku, which is the awakened stick, where we
Oh,
have to
wow.
wake
Yes.
up, you know.
I get it.
Yeah. What I've done in the last 10 years, I feel, is kind of refine what it is to meditate. And it just really a process of relaxation, but
Beautiful.
with the back upright. So
Yes.
I sit in a chair these days, and I sit with my back upright like this, but very relaxed. And the more that I can relax, the more I can let go.
Yes.
The more I can let go, the more I relax.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
becomes a positive vicious cycle. I don't think the
Yes.
word vicious is right, but the
Right. But
process is positive,
self-reinforcing.
self-reinforcing,
Yes.
so that the more I can let go and in a way shed my whatever I'm identified with and become one with my breathing and just relax into the breath and take some deep breaths in the beginning and then learn to just regulate the breath so you're very relaxed. And I don't emphasize full lotus. I don't emphasize deep concentration. It's just being one with the breath. And you could actually ask to speak to the breath. So if I say, okay, let me speak to the breath as I'm meditating. Okay, I am the breath. What am I doing? Okay, as the breath, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. And I'm not Genpo. I'm not the meditator. I'm not one meditating. I'm just the breath. And I just breathe and I relax and I shed everything, let it all go. And you get into such a deep samadhi that in a way that's self-perpetuating too, because
Yes.
the deeper the samadhi, of course, the more you're drawn in, the more
Yes.
you're kind of invited in, the deeper you go and the more you don't want to stop. And
Yes.
so meditation doesn't become or is not no longer an effort, it's effortless,
Yes.
right? As we talked about before. But it's also you reach a state of total peace and tranquility and serenity and equanimity, and it's complete freedom. And
Yes.
it's so simple. And
Yes.
so what I work with people, and they can try it on their own, is not trying to make it more complicated or difficult than it really
Yes.
is.
Yes.
And
Yes.
just to stay really simple. And they could try that 10 minutes a day, eventually maybe 30 minutes a day. Eventually, once you get into it, you don't want to stop. You might sit. I sit usually a few hours every night,
Yes.
about 4 hours every night.
Yes. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I love it. And it doesn't interfere with my day because I do it at night. And I
Yes.
still try to get about 5 hours sleep, but the sitting really makes up for a lot of the sleep.
Oh, yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Sitting up and doing that. Just basically you're sitting back into that which you are.
Exactly.
Isn't that what you're doing?
Exactly. You're just settling down into who you are.
Right.
That's what I mean by returning home.
Yes,
coming
yes.
back to your true nature.
Yes, yes.
The true self. Yeah.
That's
And
beautiful.
it's very delicious. I mean, I sometimes I call it silk samadhi, because you feel the silkiness.
Yes,
It's
yes.
all so it's my teacher used to say it's more delicious than a fresh river when you're really thirsty.
Right,
It's
right, right.
that delicious.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's something. Yeah. And
Yes,
you just want to sit more. And the more you sit, the more you stop identifying with the self or the conditioned self, the one that is picking and choosing.
yes, yes. Yeah, and I'm sure you notice that both for you and the people you work with, the more you do that, the more it carries over
Absolutely.
into everything else.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. I take that for granted that people
Right. But
that,
again,
right?
we have an audience that some people will take that for granted, but I wanted to point that out to everybody.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It begins to manifest in your daily life more and more. And at some point, you don't even remember what it used to be like.
Right. Exactly. You don't.
I work a lot with people now on eliminating internal conflict, the inner conflict, because once we eliminate the inner conflict between what we want and what we have, we talked
Right.
earlier, once we eliminate that conflict, then we're really at peace all the time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because that conflict is gone. We don't have that dialogue between ourselves and hunger.
Right.
This is what you should do. No, this is what I want to do.
Right. Beautiful. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Genpo Roshi. You can learn more about Genpo at bigmind.org. That's BIGMIND.org. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levenson's work, and the Sedona Method, please visit www.sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's SEDONA.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.